Hi, this is Marty Lieberman from Sarasota, Florida with ModernSarasota.com, and you are listening to US Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Everyone knows the phrase, less is more, but did you know the internationally famous architect who said it? Today, US Modernist Radio welcomes architect Dirk Lohan, grandson of Chicago's Mies van der Rohe. And now your host, also internationally famous, if you count Iceland, George Smart.
Hi, folks. And hello, Reykjavik. I got some nice emails from Iceland recently. In fact, we may be the #1 architecture podcast in Iceland. I don't know if they give awards for that, but you can send them to us. Reykjavik is a super fun stopover on the way to Europe. Be sure to drop in the natural springs right near the airport and hop in to the best giant hot tub in the world.
In between planes?
In between flights, that's right. However, and I won't tell you why, just trust me, there's a fish on the menu at the natural springs called escolar, or butterfish. It is the most delicious fish you will ever eat. I'm telling you, don't eat more than about 2 square inches.
Oh.
And if you want to know why, just Google it. But I digress. Today we're going to talk about Maria Ludwig Michael Mies, who eventually became Mies van der Rohe. Most people refer to him as Mies, which puts him in that rare club of people known by their first names, like Cher, or Sting, or Madonna. Born in Germany, Mies was totally into architect Adolf Losch, who famously declared that ornament is a crime and pursued unadorned design to represent a new era of technology. Mies got worldwide attention with 2 projects, the Barcelona Pavilion and the Villa Tugendhat. He joined the avant-garde Bauhaus School as director of architecture and left Germany in 1937 to head up the new architecture school at the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. He designed many buildings on that campus, including Crown Hall. Along with Gropius and Le Corbusier, Mies is widely regarded as one of the masters of modern architecture. He died 50 years ago in 1969. One of his 3 daughters was named Marianne, and her son became a talented architect in his own right. We'll meet Dirk Lohan in a moment. Support for US Modernist Radio comes from realtor Angela Rohe.
It's Episode 3, Revenge of the Developers. In our ongoing space saga, the modernist home world is crumbling from deferred maintenance. The Farnsworth House, moved from Earth 3,000 years ago, has just been turned into an IHOP, promoting all-you-can-eat bergilium pancakes.
Oh, no.
Desperate for cash, the modernists sell one of the planet's moons to Home Depot for a galactic superstore. Under attack by ruthless Republic developer Lord Hilton Hyatt Marriott Trump, modernist leader Angela Rohe sweeps into the Republic Capitol and replaces all the dilithium energy crystals with Folgers crystals.
Delicious.
Initially, of course, no one can tell the difference, but as the Republic's power source shuts down and rich, pleasing Colombian aroma covers the planet, Angela attempts to flee the besieged capital, hidden in an IKEA freighter she built from scratch. Back here on Earth, Angela's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter,
Epic greatness,
is your heroine of housing, using her architectural training to specialize in modernist real estate, advising buyers and sellers on everything from appropriate renovation to assembling an IKEA freighter. Angela Rohe is your special agent. Reach her at angelarohe.com. That's ROEHL or 919-995-0550.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Angela. Dirk Lohan is grandson of Mies van der Rohe. Dirk was born near Berlin in 1938 and left Germany to study with his grandfather at the Illinois Institute of Technology. Later, he worked with Mies designing projects such as the new National Gallery in Berlin, the IBM office building in Chicago, and the Toronto Dominion Center. For years, he was partner at Lohan Anderson and now is with White and Company. Dirk became a fellow in the AIA in 1983, which is like making the Baseball Hall of Fame. Way to go, Dirk. He served on the board of the Illinois Institute of Technology, the board of directors of the Chicago Maritime Museum, and not surprisingly, the Mies van der Rohe Society. Welcome, Dirk.
Welcome. Very nice to be part of your show.
Oh, well, thanks for being with us. Before we get started, I wanted to share a story I don't think you know about your grandfather's visit to Raleigh in 1952. Mies came down here to view what was then Dorton Arena under construction. It was North Carolina's first real large-scale modernist building, a hyperbolic paraboloid designed to house agricultural exhibitions.
Cow shows.
Cow shows, yes, moo. So he came down, he saw Dorton Arena, and then the students at the North Carolina State School of Design took him on the campus. I think he spoke there, perhaps, and then they went downtown and had some drinks and had a few more drinks. And eventually they had gotten Mies up to the second floor on Hillsborough Street to one of these walk-up apartments. And he came out and got on the landing and fell all the way down the stairs.
Oh, no. Really?
And did not move.
That's an amazing story that I never heard of.
But
are you sure he was drinking too much, or was it the curvatures of the hyperbolic paraboloid that did that to him?
It could have been that, but he was in a very conventional student apartment at the time.
No paraboloids.
No paraboloids. And he got up a few minutes later and kept walking, and they were so relieved because these students were paranoid. They had killed the great Mies van der Rohe.
Sure. Well, I in fact met him at about that same time when he was in his early 60s. He came to Germany for the first time in 1952, after World War II. I was 14 years old and spent some time with him. Before that, I've only heard about him in glowing terms from my mother. But, of course, I knew some things about him already because I grew up in his furniture. My family's place was all furnished with Mies van der Rohe furniture that he had given to my mother upon her wedding.
That's wonderful. Wow, to grow up in a house full of that kind of furniture.
Yes.
Had you been inclined towards architecture as a child, or did you have other interests, Dirk?
I was not particularly, dreaming about being an architect. I mean, it's not that I was against it at all, but I think in a very subtle, conniving way, my mother did all kinds of little things. And she, for instance, when Mies came to visit us when I was 14, there were local architects in the town where we lived that had heard about his presence, and they wanted to meet him because he was already famous. And luncheon was organized in a very nice restaurant, and my mother managed to get me invited to sit among those adult architects at the end of the table, and it was a great experience for me. So it's little things like that made me think, well, why not? Architecture is not so bad after all. And for instance, one of the things that I remember as a 14-year-old, he had in his suit pocket, he had always a kerchief there and then a pencil, a sharpened pencil. In those days, people used pencils for architectural drawings and sketching. And during the discussions with these architects in that restaurant, which was a white tablecloth restaurant, he started sketching right on the tablecloth. Explaining what he was talking about to them. And I thought, oh my God, I would never be allowed to do that. But if you, as an architect, can do that, that's a good thing.
Well, drawing is sort of second nature for an architect, so I guess the reflex was right there.
Yeah.
So now you're 14 and you've caught the bug of design. What did you start doing? Did you start drawing things at home?
Well, a little bit, but I then, upon graduation from high school, or as it's called in Germany, Gymnasium, I was 19. We had a longer schooling. Right after that, I came to Chicago as a student to study at IIT, and that's when I really began to develop a relationship with my grandfather. we spent some time. We talked. I worked in the office. Actually, I worked as a student in the model shop. I was allowed to work on some of the models that are famous in his career. There was the Bacardi building in Cuba that was never built, but we built. I remember working on a model for that at that time. I remember I'm working away, sanding or gluing something, and he came and looked into the shop, stood there in his majesty, and said, "Nah, master builder," to me. So I knew I considered that to be somewhat of a compliment. He was commenting on my model building ability.
Do you think it helped you or hindered you to be his grandson, working there in the shop?
Well, I like to say on balance it helped me because he was my mentor. I became very attached to him and was very eager to learn and be familiar with his life and career. On the other hand, I'm very glad I don't have his name. Can you imagine? Another Mies van der Rohe. Or, I mean, I've been thinking about this like the children of famous other people like Frank Lloyd Wright. That wouldn't work very well.
No. Even other architects as well who have the same, just the last name. Yeah.
Yeah.
I read that Mies was a really cool grandfather. He provided you cigars and martinis and dinners.
Oh, yes. In the 60s, when I worked in his office, I had a jour fixe, a fixed date every week on Thursday nights in his house, and he had a Hungarian cook, a woman that cooked for him, and she loved when I came because I loved her food better than he loved it. And she made all kinds of things I liked. Anyway, I spent 7 years of Thursday nights with him, talking about his life, talking about the background and the conditions and the war and the Nazi time and the Bauhaus time and all of those things. And I'm I was pumped full of information in these evenings. And he would always say, would you like to have a cigar? And in the beginning I said, no, thank you, I'm not smoking. How about a martini? Because he was drinking martinis. And I also turned them down in the beginning, but gradually I softened, and the room was so full of smoke that I thought maybe that's a good defense against it, to smoke a cigar myself. And I got into that with him, and it's been a joy. I occasionally still smoke one today, not regularly though.
Do you still have a martini from time to time?
Oh yes.
And toast your grandfather?
Yes, of course. And we have here in Chicago at Crown Hall at the IIT, they have a birthday party, the Mies birthday party, every year in March, and it's usually a martini party.
We have an architect in the Raleigh area named Brian Shawcroft, who's from England, and his dying wish in his hospital bed was to be served a martini, so somebody ran out and got him one.
That's nice, yeah.
Tell our listeners a little bit about IIT. It's a very special campus for your family, but also for architecture in general. And what was Mies's role in really designing a lot of that campus?
He visited Chicago in 1937 and then went back to Germany to make up his mind, and he decided to really leave Germany, and which was done in 1938. So he arrived in Chicago in that function as the director of architecture in 1938. And a year later, the then president of the school asked him if he would make a master plan for the campus. Now, IIT was really known as the Armour Institute. It was a small community school that was gradually developing more disciplines and more teaching facilities, and they asked him to develop a campus for the whole university, which he did. And there's another very humorous story that I learned in recent years. Somebody here in Chicago, a journalist, through what is it called? The Freedom of
Information
Act requested the files that the FBI has on Mies van der Rohe. And he was given a folder that was recorded in the 40s during World War II, when he had gone with a couple of other professors, and they were Peter Hans and Hilbersheimer, they were German-speaking, to Wisconsin over a weekend in some small, on a lake, like a little resort. And they sat down in a conference room and made plans and spoke German very actively. And it was the planning of the IIT campus that they were discussing.
Oh.
But this waiter recorded them and was very suspicious. He made notes of what he heard and saw, that they were drawing buildings and this and that. And
I assume that the waiter didn't understand German.
No, apparently not.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't understand what they were discussing,
Now, next in your career, right, you went back to Germany for a while and then returned to Chicago to work with your grandfather's firm?
Yeah. I actually graduated from the university in Munich, and then directly after that I came back permanently in 1962.
And what were some of the projects you and your grandfather worked on?
Well, probably the most important one that I did in those early years with him was the new National Gallery in Berlin. That was the only building that he designed after World War II in Germany. And that was built. In other words, before that, he'd done a number of smaller things that you mentioned already, the Tugendhat House, the Barcelona Pavilion, etc. But after World War II, there were several attempts to get him to come to Germany and do some modern building. Nothing ever worked out, but that museum was built, and it is now actually in major renovation 50 years later, and it's a wonderful museum.
Has it reopened yet?
No, it's not reopened yet. It's under construction. I was there a few months ago, sort of the halfway point of the construction. I'm involved as a consultant on it because I know this building intimately from sort of my early years.
It must be wonderful for them to have you as a consultant, to have that kind of direct experience.
Yeah, it's very helpful. The architectural office that is really in charge of it as architect of record is David Chipperfield, which is a London architect, but he has an office in Berlin, a very good office.
Oh, sure.
And I'm working with him, and we've become good friends. I jokingly say, when you get old enough, some of the sins of your youth catch up with you. Not that building was a sin, but
right.
It's been catching up with me, and not many architects have that experience.
Well, one building from your youth, I read that you admired of your grandfather's in Chicago, and that you actually live there now. Tell us about that. Yeah,
wow, you did good research. Yeah, in 1952, as I mentioned before, he finished the 860, 880 Lakeshore Drive apartment buildings. They are 26-story buildings, all glass and steel with the typical Mies mullions defining the exterior of the building. And he sent to his daughter, my mother, occasionally a packet of pictures taken by Hedrick Blessing, the well-known Chicago photographer. And these were all black and white pictures. There was Crown Hall, there was the Farnsworth House, and there was 860, 880. And I remember my mother gave me these pictures. There were 8 by 10 pictures, and I pinned them over my bed. So I grew up with all these images. And I then, as a kid, I said, one day I will want to live there. Because I could see the lake, I could see Lakeshore Drive, which, I lived in Bavaria with small roads, and there was this highway with 4 lanes in each direction. That was impressive to me. So I live there now, and I have that view, and I cherish it, and I love it very much. And so does my wife, who did not grow up the same way, but she loves it too.
So 65 years later, you made it happen.
Yeah.
Well, hang in there, folks. If you have a dream,
right. Persistence pays off.
Just keep at it.
That's right. Exactly.
Now, your grandfather, I understand he separated from your grandmother around 1918. And I understand he had a companion named Laura Marx for a long time. Was she essentially a grandmother for you?
No. They separated early on and lived separate. But in doing all the German years, he lived alone in Berlin. And then in Chicago, he also lived always alone in his apartment. But he had a friend, Laura Marx, in Chicago.
Okay.
She became his, shall we say, lady friend in Chicago. And her former husband is Sam Marx, a well-known Chicago architect as well.
Oh, okay.
He's a great interior designer, very tasteful guy, built a lot of exquisite homes on the North Shore, sort of mansions. Anyway, she was a little bit my grandmother. She survived him. He died before she did, and I visited her until she then eventually died. And she had been a student at Cranbrook Academy near
the
Detroit.
famous Cranbrook, yes.
Yes. And she studied sculpture. And one of her professors was a Swedish sculptor, Carl Milles, Milles. And she had a wonderful nude male bronze sculpture on a shelf that was about 30 inches tall. And one day I said, Laura, when I was in her apartment, I said, Laura, where did you get this Carl Milles sculpture? And she said, you know what that is? I said, yes, because I spent some time as a kid in Stockholm, in Sweden. So I was familiar with Carl Milles. And she said, when I die, you will have this sculpture.
Ooh, smart move.
And sure enough, now I have it. And I'm very proud of it, because he was a major sculptor in Scandinavia and also came to the U.S. and taught at Cranbrook. Cranbrook was sort of a Scandinavian-influenced design school with Saarinen and Milles and several other people, a little bit like the Bauhaus.
Yes. Our own George Matsumoto from North Carolina went to school there.
Yeah.
What is it in Chicago?
No, it's outside Detroit.
Okay.
Now, Dirk, you have gone on to have a hugely successful career of your own with projects at the Shedd Aquarium, the Adler Planetarium. And I wanted to hear the story about your design of the original McDonald's headquarters. This is where, was it called McDonald's Academy or Burger U or?
Yeah. Some people called it Hamburger University.
Yeah.
But the official name in our plans in the campus that we did was called the Training Center.
Oh, that's very boring.
Yeah, really. It doesn't sound like you can get a degree from a training center. But Hamburger University. Now,
well, you didn't get a degree either from them.
Oh,
It was a McDonald's degree, Tom.
Yeah.
It was a McDonald's degree. You know how to flip a burger from one
It's
side
a
to the
degree
other.
with special sauce on it.
Yeah, right.
So you were very young at the time. How did you get this commission? Pretty incredible.
It's very interesting. Ray Kroc was gone by then. I did meet him a couple of times, but Fred Turner was the new CEO, and they were growing and very successful, and they wanted to have a new headquarters facility. And they invited several architects to make proposals. This was like a design competition. And I was one of them, probably because of there was a connection through the IBM building here in Chicago. Somebody who managed that building became a manager at McDonald's. That's why I was invited. So we designed something, and the SOM was there, and King from Philadelphia.
Kling,
Yeah.
Kling Stubbins.
Yeah, right. So there were a whole bunch of them. And they were all presented, and we had interviews. And one day, out of the blue, I get a call in my office from Fred Turner. By that time, he called me Dirk. Dirk, can you come and see me sometime? Can you come and see me? I said, sure. When do you like me to come? Well, now. And I said, oh, okay. I thought, well, that can't be bad, right, when he calls. So I drove out to Oak Brook, which is a suburb of Chicago, and I went into his office, and he wasn't in his office, but there was a bottle of champagne with 2 glasses. And I thought, well, that's promising.
Yeah.
And then he came and said, I want to give you this project, but not because I like what you designed in the competition phase, but because I believe I can work with you.
Ah.
And that's what exactly happened. We worked closely together, came regularly to his so-called war room, where he had drawings pinned up, and we
were these drawings of burgers or buildings?
No, not burgers. They were drawings of the buildings.
Okay.
We had an office building, this training center, and a lodge, a hotel. The hotel was operated by Hyatt, but it was owned by McDonald's for their own internal use, for people to come to be trained and franchisees to come and visit and so on and so on.
So a dormitory for the university.
It was more than a dorm. It's a very nice lodge.
Wow.
Yeah. With a huge fireplace and a wonderful bar and a couple of restaurants that didn't serve just burgers.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get to see the secret burger room?
I think I did, yes. In fact, one day we were asked in a meeting to do a test, and that was the chicken McNuggets. They were coming up with that idea, and we all had to eat them and tell him what we thought of them.
Oh,
so
my
you
God,
can
you
see,
ate one of the
as
first
an
chicken
architect,
McNuggets.
you have to have multi-talented,
Yeah, really. Thing that you probably never thought that would be part of your job. How was it?
Well, I thought it was good. When you're young, they're good. Now I wouldn't eat them anymore. So
Did you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement after you ate the McNugget?
I don't recall that, but I think very soon thereafter they came out with them publicly.
Okay.
We had designed for them and eventually a big test kitchen where they did these things, and they had seats on the periphery of it behind some glass where public people could come and test things and observe things and judge this. In other words, they like to see open criticism of their products and methods.
That almost sounds like an operating theater in the early days of surgery.
Yeah.
Now, Dirk, we don't typically associate McDonald's with beauty, but I understand your campus was quite lush.
Yes, it was a very nice project. I loved it, in fact. I loved working on it. My original design was more Miesian, more rectilinear, and then as time went on, working with them and with him, he would always challenge me. I want what you think, what you are. I don't want your grandfather, that sort of thing. So I did that. And it has a touch of the Prairie School character, if you know what I mean by that. The Midwestern.
Oh, yes. We talk about Prairie all the time.
Frank Lloyd Wright feel. Not that it is Frank Lloyd Wrightish at all, but it blends into nature very well. It's very contextual. And we dammed up a little creek and made a lake and a waterfall. I mean, it was just a fun project.
Is McDonald's still there?
Yes, it's still there, but they're selling it now because the new CEO who runs the company decided to move back into Chicago, into the city, and they're occupying a sort of run-of-the-mill boxy office building now, a brand new one. But that campus is not yet sold, but it's open, it's on the market.
So if you're a giant burger chain, there might be real estate available.
Hardee's, Wendy's,
yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
In and out.
In and out. Wouldn't that be great if In and Out came to that part of the world?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the interesting things is that I've done a number of corporate headquarters for American companies. And today there is a real trend, contrary to what it was 30, 40 years ago, where everybody wanted to be in the suburbs, in the countryside, in nature. Now they want to be back in the city because the young people want to be in the city.
Yeah, Quicken's taking over Detroit.
Yeah.
We have a Red Hat here in Raleigh.
Yep.
And some of the old large projects are being reworked now and repurposed, and I'm involved in one of them that I did earlier for Ameritech. It was a 1.4 million square feet project outside Chicago, and another one you may know of is the Bell Labs building in New Jersey.
Oh, sure.
That Eero Saarinen did.
Yeah.
That's
Famous
been
building.
repurposed now.
What is that going to be?
It's called Bellworks, and it's a multi-purpose. You can rent office space there. There are co-working spaces. There are shops in there, restaurants, coffee shops, fitness centers, anything and everything. And they have music performances in the big atriums and so on and so on. The developer calls it a metroburb.
A metroburb?
Yes.
That's
something for you to you dig into.
Yeah.
Like
I don't know about that word.
So, Dirk, I want to ask you about one of your grandfather's most famous projects, the Edith Farnsworth House in Plano, Illinois.
Yes.
Commissioned around 46, built in 51.
Yep.
It was featured in a 1947 Museum of Modern Art exhibit even before construction began. Edith Farnsworth and Mies got along somewhat and then really well and then not at all. They ended up suing each other towards the end.
Well, she sued him.
She sued him. Okay. I read an article because there's a movie coming out about this.
Yes, correct.
With, let's see, Jeff Bridges and Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Yes, I know about that, but I haven't seen anything at all about it. So.
Yeah, it's not out yet, but they are playing this up that Farnsworth and your grandfather had a romantic relationship at some point.
Of course they would.
Yeah.
Hollywood would have to do that, but I this is not my expertise. I don't know. I wasn't there. Really.
He never talked about it?
No.
No.
About a relation? No, he wouldn't have said that anyway. But I think there's no question in my mind that they got along very well. They were very friendly for a while, but when she realized that now I'm going to say something that he wouldn't come with the building.
Oh, okay.
She got a little disappointed, and then the cost was higher than anticipated. They didn't even have a contract for this project. They did this over cocktail napkins.
Oh.
You know.
Was your grandfather drawing again on the tablecloth, I assume?
Yeah, I'm sure he did, yes.
But he did not convey with the building.
Oh.
No. Well, you were involved in restoring this building, which has had a number of interesting and unique problems. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, the building is actually located in a floodplain on the Fox River, which is in western Illinois, not too far from Chicago. And Mies raised the house on stilts. It's about the ground floor is about 5 feet up in the air, or the main floor of the house, and underneath it's all open, so that the river can flood the plain, and the water is under the house for a few days, and as the water recedes, the house is reborn in the grass landscape. Well, there are pictures of that, but what happened after it was built several years later, and this happened now several times over its lifespan, the floods became higher than ever recorded before. And the highest recorded was in 1996, when I took care of the house for my friend Lord Palumbo, an Englishman.
He's a serial collector, isn't he? He has the Kentucky Knob House, I think.
Yes, correct. He had that house, and it flooded 5 feet, not up to the floor, but into the main floor.
Oh.
In other words, you
5
can
feet
imagine 5 feet of water inside the house. And some of the windows broke, luckily. I say luckily because if they had not, the house would have been floated like a boat.
Oh.
Yeah, really. Anyway, and it was severely damaged, the wood paneling and all the systems and the kitchen, which is an old St. Charles steel kitchen that became rusty afterwards and not very nice. And well, all of this I took care of. Also, one of the paintings, Peter Palumbo had a wonderful Andy Warhol painting of Liz Taylor in the house on one of the walls, and that floated away and downstate into the farmland. And I'm always thinking there's some happy farmer that has Liz Taylor now in his barn.
Worth $1 million, I'm sure.
Right.
Yes,
Has
right.
both Andy Warhol and Liz Taylor.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But the house is now owned by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which is not a national organization, not a government organization. It's a private foundation that protects major landmarks.
That's
and
good.
this house is owned by them, and there's a competent director there, and they are still talking about what can we do to protect the house from these floods, and I'm involved in that, so we're still struggling with that. Fundraising is always an issue.
Right.
But what are the options? I mean, you can either
Jack it up.
right? Or you can build some kind of giant Donald Trump wall around it.
Yeah, that's funny. That's true. I think I'm going to propagate that a little bit more so that the idea dies more quickly.
Yes, that would probably be the effect.
Yes. But I'm a proponent of a hydraulic lift system that would raise the house when the floods occur.
Oh,
It's really technically possible.
Oh, yeah,
it's a
sure.
little bit expensive, but that's what the trust has officially adopted, but not yet
Okay.
funded.
how long would that take to put in?
Oh, not that long.
No, because you just
6 months.
chop off one of the
One
piers.
summer you can do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you wouldn't see anything.
Except when it was
equipment is
deployed.
all underground. Yeah.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It would be the coolest party move, though. You get everybody in the house and say, "Hey, look at this," and press the button. Now, is it true that your grandfather never set foot in the house? I read that.
Well, after the lawsuit, no.
After the lawsuit. Okay.
No, he was very bitter about this. He did not set foot again into the house. And when Edith Farnsworth, when I was already in Chicago, she officially put the house on the market. It was for sale. And we in the family, my mother and Laura Marx and I, and we said, Mies, you should buy this house. You could spend wonderful weekends out there, looking at nature and so on. He wouldn't touch it. He wouldn't have anything to do with it. So then one day, Peter Palumbo, we were doing a building for him in London, came and he asked me, he said, where is that famous Farnsworth house I've heard about? And I said, well, it's not very far away. We can go there right now, because we were driving. I was showing him things in Chicago. And we drove out to the house. He fell in love with it. He went to Italy, where she had retired, and bought it from her.
No.
For the house was built for about $75,000-$80,000.
Which was a lot in 1951.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
And he bought it from her for $220,000 with the land.
Oh.
And then he sold it again in the 90s after the big flood for $7.5 million.
Okay.
So who owned it? Who owned it between Palumbo and the National Trust? Do you know?
Nobody.
Okay.
It was auctioned. He put it up at auction at Sotheby's, and it was auctioned off as a piece of art, not as a piece of real estate.
Well,
Very interesting.
That's smart.
Yeah. We here in Chicago had a committee. We collected money, and we made it possible that the National Trust become a preservation organization. Yeah.
Tell us about your grandfather and less is more. Did he come up with that? Because he's certainly credited with it.
Yes, he's famous for that saying, of course. But he found a similar saying. Don't ask me who the philosopher was. It's some German philosopher that had coined the phrase, weniger ist mehr. When you translate that, means less is more.
Okay.
And that's how he knew about it. And of course, it suited him for his aesthetic of less decor, less decoration, down to the essence of things, abstraction. So I think it was a wonderful, very catchy phrase for people to understand what he's all about.
And was he also responsible for God is in the details?
Yes. Yeah. And another one that you may not have heard is you cannot invent a new architecture every Monday morning.
I like that one.
Yeah.
You were involved with the renovation of Soldier Field in 2003.
Yes.
And let's be honest, you got hung out to dry by the fans and the Chicago Tribune. Yet the New York Times has ranked this project as one of the 5 best new buildings of 2003, and it got an AIA Design Excellence Award in 2004. Has the public warmed to it since then?
Yes, I think so. It's now part of Chicago. You can't help that, It's a big building. It's in a wonderful location right on the lakefront. And from the stadium, you can see the skyline. And we did not tear down the old neo-Greek colonnades. We preserved all that. But you're right, the Tribune and its architecture critic Blair Kamen, for some reason, took a dislike to it and attacked not only me, but also Mayor Daley very much for this.
Now, what were people so upset about?
It was the preservationists. They wanted this old building to be preserved as it was. Build a new stadium somewhere else was sort of the attitude.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the fact that we combined it, a new stadium within the walls of the old, they didn't like, but it actually made it very unique, a special place, and more memorable that way.
Now, was this about the time that they closed down Meigs Field?
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, very much so.
For those of you who don't know, Meigs Field is an airport on Lake Michigan.
The lake, yeah.
That is gorgeous
directly east of Soldier Field.
Yeah.
And private planes and politicians' planes would fly and land there all the time, corporate executives, etc. It was not for the big planes, so it was not a major public terminal.
And an example of rampant public paranoia, the mayor at that time was afraid that terrorists were going to land at Meigs Field and terrorize the city, and so he bulldozed it, I think, in the middle of the night.
Yes, correct.
And I guess that stopped all the terrorists from flying into Chicago.
Well, they could come to Midway.
Yes.
What happened?
But it was, it was interesting when Meigs Field was active. Living in where I live now at 860, I live on the top floor, which is 26 floors. The planes would come across the lake, perpendicular to Chicago, right aiming at us, at our windows practically. And then a few hundred yards from it, they made a sharp left turn to line up with the runway at Meigs Field.
You hope.
No, they did always. I mean, I remember experiencing this, and it's fascinating. Of course, now that's gone away. Nobody flies that way anymore.
So what are they doing with that beautiful airstrip land?
It's a park.
It's a park. Okay.
Yeah, it's been made into a park, yes. And unfortunately, it's a little harder to reach, so it's not as popular as other places, but I think it's okay. There's a nature preserve now, as far as I know. I haven't been there in a while. So.
Well, Dirk, what are you working on now? Your grandfather was rocking along after age 80, and you are too.
Yeah, I'm rocking along too. I'm working on a couple of things. 2 museums. One is a small Adler and Sullivan building that burned down. And it was originally designed as a synagogue. And then in the 20s, it became a Pilgrim Baptist church, African-American place, considered to be the birthplace of gospel music.
Wow.
And there is a wonderful guy who has a TV company, African-American guy, who is the developer, and he wants to build a National Museum of Gospel Music out of this ruin. And the exterior wall, the Sullivan Wall, is still standing. So that's what I've made a proposal for that, and that's supposed to go ahead this year. And another one is the Chicago Maritime Museum. We have a extensive maritime history. Chicago is unimaginable without Lake Michigan, but there's no museum here that shows that history. So we created a new museum, and I'm in the process of designing a new museum.
Now, just for the record, Dirk, just so I want to eliminate any possible rumor, you're not related to Lindsay Lohan, are you?
I'm turning off the recording.
I have used that occasionally to my advantage.
Okay, cool.
Okay, but I'm not.
Okay.
Okay, so that's settled.
But it's funny, I'll tell you very quick. Before she became famous, I had to always spell my last name because people, Lohan, how do you spell it? And then I started saying, like Lindsay Lohan. And people were happy. They never asked how to spell it.
Of course, they knew that.
Okay.
That's funny.
Well, Dirk, this has been really great, and thank you so much for taking time to join us and tell us these stories about you and your grandfather.
Thank you very much. I appreciated it. Contact me again when I'm 90. I will have many more stories.
Thanks for listening. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist Houses, 919-995-0550. Okay, take us out, Tom.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover 7,000 classic modernist houses, and access 2.5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. US Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios, Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. We have an opening for guest researcher as Cindy Stratton, not a real name, hasn't been heard from in a while. US Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational organization for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. I'll be back with George in 2 weeks, more or less, with another edition of US Modernist Radio.